see. All right, well, I'm Ryan Slack. I'm going to talk about bats and whips, which are whippoorwills. I shortened it to make it a cool title. That's control of the night. So let's go down to classification. Animals with a backbone, that's us, chordata. That's also us, vertebrata, vertebrate backbone. The class Mammalia, which means hair and live birth, nurse young, that's us too. This is where we separate, is the order level. Chiroptera, I said they have hands. Chiro means hand and ptera means wings, so they have hand wings. And there are over 1,100 species of bats worldwide, and 50% of the bats in the tropics, or 50% of the mammal species in the tropics are bats. So we'll get into that a little bit more. So I got to go over here for this. This is the hand wing. So there's an upper arm, there's a forearm, there's even a thumb, and all of these are fingers. It's exactly what we've got. So if you blew up my fingers, basically they've got blown up fingers and a tiny thumb, the big thumb one and the big fingers, and a small thumb. But if you did what they've got, I could probably reach both walls with my fingers in here, and maybe I could fly away if I had that. So night jars, do we know what night jars are? Are they that? Night jars, those are whippoorwills, and they're this family of bird. I'm not even going to try to say it. They're found in all continents except Australia. There are about 100 species of night jars worldwide, and they're all nocturnal. They're known for their long wings, their short legs, and their very short bills. They kind of resemble owls with their large eyes and their silent flight, and they also resemble hawks with their long wings for soaring. A common nighthawk is also a night jar. So we have 3 species here in Indiana. The top one, there's a whippoorwill. The middle one, there's a Chuck-Will's widow, and that's the common nighthawk. Not a hawk, but they call it a nighthawk. Best identified by their calls. If you can identify them by looking at them, you're better than I am at bird identification. Chuck-Will's widow and whippoorwill, whippoorwill. Everybody knows that sound, but that sound seems to be disappearing off the landscape, and we'll talk about that. So how are bats and whips different? Bats fly. They're the only true flying mammal. They call out a flying squirrel, but it actually glides. Bats actually move their hands and fly. It's against everything that we can understand that they even fly. It's almost like they swim on the air. They don't have hollow bones. They don't have air sacs. They don't have all the things that birds have to fly, but yet somehow they get up there. Also, interesting thing with them is echolocation, where they send out a high frequency and listen for the bounce back, and that's how they find their insect prey, listening. So they have these weird processes in their ears, which isn't so weird because we have them too. They're called traguses right on the front of our ear canal, and that helps focus sound into our ear canals, and every one of them has a different type of tragus. Some are long, some are short. They're all different shapes and sizes, and they're actually one of the ways that we identify the bats as we get down to looking at this. The shape of the tragus helps us know which kind of bat we have in our hand. There are about 6 species in Indiana that if I hold it out here, it could be one of any of those 6. I'm down to looking at toe hairs and foot attachments and traguses and hair types to try to figure out what kind of bat I have in my hand. Cold weather. Some of these bats are adapted to cold weather. Hoary bats don't go in caves at all. They migrate south for the winter and that kind of thing. So you can see they have a lot of hair on their wings. If you turned that tail over, you would see the whole tail's covered in hair, all that kind of stuff. So they're adapted that way as well, to not have to hibernate. So predator-prey interactions, insectivores, all of our local bats eat insects, that's it. There are lots of other things that they do, but in other places, but ours are only insect eaters. There are also fruit eaters in the rainforest. There are nectar feeders down in the southwest U.S. Highly specialized ones, there's a frog-eating bat, there's a fish-eating bat, and then we talked about the vampire bats, but they have specialized legs and feet that they grab fish out of the water and all that kind of stuff. It's crazy. And then bats are also prey. Owls, snakes, raccoons, cats all eat bats. And the raptors in Austin, Texas. Who's seen the Bat Bridge in Austin, Texas? Do you know about that? Yeah. So there's a bridge right in the middle of Austin. It's one of the busiest bridges in Austin, and it's full of bats. And it was, instead of them saying this bridge is a problem because it has bats in it, when they had to replace that bridge, they actually studied the expansion joints that the bats were in, and they created those expansion joints falsely all the way down the underside of the entire bridge. And now there's about 1 million bats that live in that bridge. And if you ever get a chance in the summertime and you're in Austin, go down to the Congress Street Bridge, and you and everybody else will be down there that evening. And it's a spectacle to see all the bats and all the people, really, because it's a festival atmosphere every night in Austin over bats. And why I brought all that up is because when those bats come out in a huge blackening the sky, every raptor in Austin, Texas comes by and gets a little snack before they go to bed. So red-tailed hawks, a peregrine falcon, a merlin, a kestrel, each one of them, pick them out. There's that one. Everybody else is watching the bats. I'm watching the birds.
Wow.
So whippoorwills, nocturnal. These are their adaptations. They have that short bill and wide gaping mouth for eating lots of big moths and beetles, things like that. They're known for their call, obviously. Everybody knows the whippoorwill call, I think, even though we don't hear it as much, they still know it. They're medium-sized, mottled brown, gray, black plumage, and they camouflage well on the forest floor. You can see there. They lay 2 eggs right on the oak leaves. They don't even make a nest. They help each other incubate those eggs. They migrate all the way to southern Mexico for the winter. They all seem to go to one pretty centralized spot down there. And they're a part of southern folklore. I don't think you can listen to 10 bluegrass songs without hearing whippoorwills mentioned in 5 of them. So they're a big part of everything. Lyre bats and whips important. They both control insects. That's their biggest importance, their biggest job. Bats, for example, they eat 50 to 100% of their body weight every night in insects. One colony of 1,000 bats can consume 22 pounds of insects a night. And bats and mosquitoes, you always hear they can eat their body weight in mosquitoes every night. You see that in the news and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's if you had your choice, is that what you would eat? Mosquitoes? I'm sure they're eating mosquitoes, but eating their body weight in mosquitoes every night was somebody doing a study where they put a bat in a flight cage, filled it with mosquitoes, and lo and behold, it ate its body weight in mosquitoes that night. So they can do it. Do they actually do it? Probably not. I mean, would you take the Big Mac over the Skittle? The moths and beetles are what they truly eat. And those are ag pests. So, and then whippoorwills as well. They specialize in large moths, but they eat beetles as well, and bats and different sized insects for both of them at night are why they're important. So bats are also important for pollination. There's one at somebody's hummingbird feeder. Some of these tropical flowers and the cactuses bloom only at night and once, and that's only bats that are pollinating them. And then seed dispersal, they're fruit-eating bats, and they when they say fruit bats and fruit-eating bats, they're actually just taking chunks out of the fruit and they're squeezing it and getting the juice and the pulp, spitting seeds out all over the forest floor. And there's a word for when you go down there, I haven't seen this, but I've heard it from other bat biologists, that you see the splats on the forest floor all over the place in the morning from where all the bats have spit the seeds everywhere. So they replant, they reforest the tropics with that 50% of the mammal species being. So here's a chart, kind of shows what bats pollinate, and the biggest takeaway on this one is agave. There is no agave without bats. Bacardi or one of them knows that. They have the bat on their as their symbol. They know that if it wasn't for bats, there'd be no tequila. So, but they pollinate all of these things. Bat and whip habitat. Where do they live? So bats in the summer, where do they go during the day? Most of them segregate into bachelor and maternity colonies, and the pups are raised by the females in a fully maternal colony. Some congregate in large or small groups, and then some of them roost alone. Where is that? It's in trees, hollow trees for the most part, under bark, hanging from branches. So under bark, where do you get bark that you can get under? I mean, outside of a shagbark, hickory, and things like that, of course they use those. But that's mostly dead trees. And so when trees die, that bark starts to peel up and slough off, and you see it hanging there. Perfect habitat for bats. That's what bats love. Do we love dead trees? Okay, some of us do here in this room, but
for this reason,
most of us do not. And for that reason, it's good to have dead trees. Now, the bigger the dead tree, the better. Hollow trees don't get hollow in the first, I don't know what, 100 years. So hollow trees and dead tree, the bigger the better, with the more of the bark fall off. Do we like big trees? We like them. Do we keep them? We don't. We keep everything at a medium age forest. And so these are a couple of the things that the bats are up against when it comes to where they have their young, where they live. And they also can get in buildings, and they also, there are some bats that have their young in caves. They hibernate in a different cave than they have their young in, but they're always in caves. A gray bat is that, and we have those in Indiana. So whippoorwill habitats, here's kind of a range map of them. This is their summer habitat, their migration areas, and their year-round and winter. This is year-round, and this is winter habitat down here. In the summer, they like open forests, woodlands, and shrublands, and open forest is the answer there. So how do you get an open forest? Probably the older the better the forest is, the more open understory you have where they can easily spot their insects.
What's going on in northern Indiana and Ohio?
It's called agriculture. But yeah, there's not a lot of forest up there, and so yeah, if you've driven through these areas, especially this area, it's very, very agriculture oriented. So they're just not there, and that's becoming a more that hole's probably getting bigger, not smaller, over time, which is another problem for them. So roosting locations, they like to sit along roadsides. Sometimes you'll see their eyes when you're driving down a road like this at night. They prefer open, like I said, open understory, allowing them to hunt. And then conversion of forests into ag land and things like that is detrimental. And just keeping things at ag land is detrimental. Not letting forests grow back has been part of the problem. Bats in the summer, they're pretty much going everywhere looking for insects, but they seem to really like the aquatic habitats. There are a lot of different insects that come up out of the water, and so things like this with the right temperature, the water staying the right temperature by being protected by shade and things like that are what they really like. But they forage along corridors like this a lot. That's why why I add roads and trails, because they like to go do they do their rounds basically, and it's easier to hunt when you can move through than a dense understory that they have to kind of navigate through. Whippoorwill habitat, open roads, trails, roadsides. Sometimes the insects are drawn to lights, and that's a problem for whippoorwills as well, but that may be why they like roadsides and just like I said, open forest, understories. We don't have a lot of that, so that's part of their problems. Bats in winter, hibernation is the biggest one for them. That bat right there is a tricolored bat. It's almost to be listed on the endangered species list, but that bat has the condensation all over it because it's basically the temperature of the rock itself. So they get themselves down to that kind of temperature, and they're asleep the whole winter that way. So most bats hibernate in caves. Some will hibernate in trees. Some even get under the leaf litter. We've noticed that, and these are new things that we've found, is that somebody was doing a prescribed burn and would see a bat fly out once in a while. So we started, red bats are very common, so we don't pay much attention to them. So we put a transmitter on them, and we found that they live under the leaf litter. They're even, now we've found hibernating under the snow in the leaf litter. And they'll also hibernate in buildings. And then if it's a nice night and the insects are going to be out, the bats will sometimes wake up and go out and look for insects too. Migration, gray bats migrate great distances. They're the ones that they use a different cave for their young than they do for their hibernation, and they're not going to even stay close to the one cave to the other cave, winter versus summer. Silver-haired bats, that's a silver-haired bat that you can barely see on that tree. They migrate south for the winter. Hoary bats migrate long distances to the south. A little story about silver-haired bats. We think we know everything, right? So we catch silver-haired bats in May here in Indiana, and but we don't catch them any other time. So we of course said, well, they migrate through here in May. They migrate somewhere else in the fall, and we don't know. We don't know what they do. But we came out with these things called acoustic detectors where we can hear the bats, and we've gotten those down to a science where we can actually identify the bats from the calls. Silver-haired bats everywhere when this thing all summer long, and we were like, well, that's wrong. Something's wrong with this thing. And then we now realize, we know that there's some kind of insect hatch that happens in May, and those bats come down to the level of our nets in May. And the rest of the time, they're all up there. So, yeah, we think we're smart, but.
Can you circle that bat? Just go circle that bat. It's hard to see.
So its head is right here, and that's one of its forearms. And this is its tail, and that's that hair all over the tail and everything. So it's right there. So whippoorwill habitat in the winter, they migrate mostly to southern Mexico, and it's a kind of a small area that they all from the whole United States go to. So they occupy scrubby open habitat down there. I'll talk about how they thought at first that the problem with the whippoorwills was something to do with that down there, the deforestation or whatever that was happening down there was the problem. But they're now starting to do studies where they're finding that there are whippoorwills here, they're not here, there's lots of them over here, up here. And so they're starting to now try to figure out that it's more than just that they're disappearing. They disappear equally everywhere if that was the case. So they're starting to figure out that now they're focused on how they migrate through, they funnel through here. There's a lot of light pollution from Houston and down going on there, so they're starting to wonder if, because they stop over there on their way, the light pollution's a problem, and then of course the things that I already talked about with our fragmenting of habitat and not allowing trees to get the right size and the open understories. There's a lot more to it than they think now than just the winter grounds.
What was the difference between the two maps?
Oh, I'm not sure. These came out of some kind of study that I was looking at. I don't know. It just basically is showing. Yeah, so we can now put GPS transmitters on these things that'll show all their movements, and they can fly completely out of cell phone range and stuff. And when they fly back in, it uploads all of their movements that happened while they were outside of phone range and things. So that study was showing all that kind of stuff. We even have light tags that we can put on them now where it'll it'll tell us when the sun came up and when it went down, and you can get it down to, okay, then that means it was right in that area. And all these and those are a lot lighter than the cell phone type of stuff. And so yeah, there's all kinds of really cool things that come up. So I meant to say, why don't we see bats or whips or hear whips? Okay, I did say it right there. I misread that the first time. Yeah, why don't we see them or hear them anymore? So we have 12 species of bats in Indiana. These are them. Some of these, like gray bats, barely make it across the Ohio River. Southeastern bats barely make it to Evansville area. Big-eared bats barely make it across the Ohio River as well. But the rest of those are mostly found across the entire state. Here in Indiana, we have 3 species that are endangered, and one that's proposed to be endangered species, which is the tricolored bat. Go into that. Gray bats, they're the ones I said only use caves, so they've been endangered forever, and it's mostly because everybody was trashing caves like crazy way back in the day before we knew what we were doing, and all the myths said, let's go in the cave and kill all the bats because they're a problem. And so we had all that habitat loss from all of that, and then when they use 2 different caves, they have twice as much of a chance of having a problem. And so we've gotten rid of all that problem. We've put on cave gates. We know all the things, don't disturb the bats and all this. And these bats have actually come back over time, and they're doing very well. They're doing quite well now. They almost took them off the endangered species list until a thing called white nose syndrome showed up, which a lot of you know. I'll talk about a little bit, but they're down south, and white nose syndrome happened up north. And so they were about to delist it, and then it showed up and started moving south, and they said, all right, we better not delist it, because if it disappears from white nose syndrome, we're going to put it right back on. Doesn't seem to be bothering them, so they're probably going to come off the list soon. Indiana bats have been listed since before there was an endangered species list. All of the same problems with winter habitat, and then they did the same thing with them. Got control, figured out where they were living, got those caves protected, all that kind of stuff. Their population numbers went like this. So when they don't go like this, we know we've still got a problem. So now we focus on loss of roost trees, the dead trees, the big trees, all that kind of stuff. That's why you hear a lot about tree clearing and bats. Is mostly trying to protect Indiana bats. They specialize in big dead trees. They're the ones that love it the most. So, and then the other 2 problems that we've got are these 2, a double whammy that have kind of happened at the same time. And so Indiana bats are actually going back up. White nose syndrome hasn't hit them as bad as some of the other species we're finding out, but it's taken us a while to figure that out. So then we have these two, the turn of the century now, we can say that, 2000. These 2, every time we put a net up, we'd catch one of those 2. Now we can barely catch them. So, and it's got to do with these things. It obviously wasn't a habitat problem for them because they were everywhere, no matter what idiotic thing we were doing with habitat, they didn't care. But these 2 things right here are what are the cause of the loss of those 2 species, and so they're on the endangered species list. And northerns are on the endangered species list. Tricoloreds are this close. Decline of whippoorwills, some of the same things, but use of pesticides and planting of non-native species cause an insect decline. That's part of their problem, part of the bats' problem too. Deforestation, conversion of, this is like, I'm talking about solid conversion, like will never be a forest again type of stuff when we talk about that. It's not just that you lose it, but if you make it such that it never grows back, you've lost that. Population isolation, I mean, those things call and call and call and call, and a mate doesn't hear them. That's a problem. Reduced food, road mortality, insects are drawn to lights, and they're drawn to the insects, especially moths love lights, we know that. And then predation, coming from fragmentation, these things can get to the middle of the woods a lot easier and prey on everything. And then light pollution during migration, I kind of talked about in Texas, they think is a problem as well. So white nose syndrome, I'll go over that for those that don't know. It's an unknown disease, it's a fungus. It causes 90 to 100% mortality in some of the hibernating caves for the bats. Basically, there's a picture. This picture shows up in everybody's white nose syndrome. It's a classic. It gets on their mucous membranes, it comes out their nose, it gets on their wings, and so they lose all of the store of fat because they're irritated by it. I think they wake up and try to get it off of themselves or whatever, and then their fat dries up before the winter is over, and then they say, oh, it must be spring, I'm out of energy here, and they fly out and there's nothing to eat. So they were finding dead bats everywhere in the snow in New York, and then they realized they had a problem, and we actually found hibernacula that way because people would call and say, I got bats all over my porch and in the snow, and oh, there's another cave somewhere that we don't know about. So yeah, kind of went over this, but it's all these cave hibernating bats. Those tree bats that migrate and stuff I was talking about, they don't get it at all. But anything that hibernates in a cave can have a problem. It likes that cold environment. That's why I don't think it does as well when it went south. But there it is everywhere. This is where it started in 08. It started at that X, and this is kind of the heat map. This is where it is and where they thought it would go. That's where it was and where it is now. It made a giant unnatural jump to clear out here, out of nowhere, and so that's why no bat does that trip. So that's why we think that it's us spreading it, and so we're still very careful with caving and all that kind of stuff, cleaning gear and things like that, because there's no way that makes that jump otherwise. So cave gates are an important thing. You can't just throw up anything. They protect the bats from humans and all that kind of stuff. People love going in caves and just doing dumb things. So the cave gates are important. They can't just be made anyway. They're made out of angle iron. We figured out they have to be this far apart. The airflow has to be perfect still. You can't mess with the temperature inside the cave and all that kind of stuff. This is a chute that allows them to fly out unencumbered, but somebody can't maneuver that, which somebody I'm sure has, but you do your best. And so,
People
everything's
try to take little drones in there to get.
I never heard of that, thanks. Someone, don't say that too loud. Yeah. So how can we help bats? We can help dispel those myths I was talking about. That is a huge thing. You wouldn't believe it, but it is such a huge thing. Not disturbing hibernating bats or maternity colonies in the trees. Putting up a bat house is a good thing. Bat houses are not like bluebird boxes where you put one up and a bluebird shows up. Bats don't do that. So a lot of times you'll put one up and go, I can't get a bat in here. I don't understand. Moving them around, it's all about it can be too hot or too cool. They like it warm, but not too warm, and all that kind of stuff. Never put a bat box on a tree. Bats look at a tree as a tree, and a bat box is a bat box. They don't see a bat box on a tree for whatever reason. You put it on a building or whatever, and the higher you can get it, the better. If you get below 15 feet, that's usually a number that reduces the viability of them using it. The other thing I like to talk about bat boxes is they need maintenance. They need to be taken care of. You can't just set the box and forget it. I'll say it's not a good Eagle Scout project. They need constant attention. So that's the other thing I'll say about bat boxes. Leave dead trees standing. Nobody likes to do that, but anytime that you can, that's a great thing for bats. Somebody here does. Maintaining the wooded buffers around streams and wetlands, that allows the water to be the right temperature for the maximum amount of insects. And it's a big one now, only plant native species. We're getting this stuff everywhere, and insects don't use non-native plants. So how can you help whippoorwills? Reducing the pesticide use and the habitat destruction in any way you can. Opening up forest understory is always good. Fire is a good thing for them. Nighttime light reductions are good. Moonlight's good. Unnatural light's bad. And right there again, only native species insects are the important thing. This is a print by William Zimmerman here from Brown County. He's a famous artist from Indiana. That's them going after a Luna moth. And then I always like this circular look of this Audubon print of whippoorwills going after the big moths.